So Ramit Sethi, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's pretty famous. He wrote a book called I Will Teach You to Become Rich, or I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I saw a video of his this morning actually, and he was talking about how he's American, so I'm in Canada, I'm in Toronto, Canada, but same concept. So he's talking about how most Americans, they buy more house than they can afford, and they buy a car that they don't need. So they think that, okay, you get married, you have kids, and then now you need a big house for the kids and with a big backyard, and then you need a 7-seater SUV because now you had one kid. That's how they kind of justify it. The main thing that he talks about that most people don't put out there, and I'll link his video up here so you can go check it out. Back in the day, back when our parents and our people even older than our parents were buying homes, a house used to cost 2.5 times your gross income. So in the scenario that he describes, your household income is $50,000 gross, and the house costs 2.5 times your income, meaning it costs $125,000. And what you would do is you would save 20% down, which is $25,000 to put down in your house, and your total carrying cost of your house, which includes mortgage, property tax, insurance, interest, is $1,250. He's like the only person on the internet that's really talking about this. And I felt for the longest time that I was alone, because everybody wants to go out and buy a house because that is the right thing to do, because we've all heard it. You don't want to throw your money away by renting or give your money to the landlord and pay the landlord's mortgage. And the thing is, if the numbers make sense, and this is what Ramit talks about, if the numbers actually make sense and you actually run the numbers and you do the calculation of what it would cost you to own that house for, let's just say, the next 20 to 30 years, the total cost of ownership, then obviously for sure it makes financial sense to buy the house. He also talks about how in the most expensive cities in the world, like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York, which he's lived in, it doesn't make sense to buy there. It makes more sense to rent. And why does he say that? And why do more people buy and not rent? Because they don't know about index investing and investing in the S&P 500. So most people don't know the opportunity cost of, if you were to take $100,000 and put it into a house versus $100,000 put into an S&P 500 index fund, how much better off you would be. Of course, you can't live in an S&P 500 index fund, but you can rent while you're doing that. And you're building wealth the same way you would build wealth with a house, except as Ramit calls it, you don't have phantom costs. Phantom costs are the costs that you forget about completely when you own a house and you buy the house for, let's just say you buy the house for $200,000 and you sell it for $500,000. That $300,000, you think that's your profit. No, but you're forgetting all your phantom costs, which are, how much did you pay in property taxes? Anything that you incurred to own that house, to live in that house. How much did you pay in property taxes? How much did you pay in interest? How much did you pay in maintaining your property? How much did you pay in repairing your property? Repairing the sprinklers, repairing your roof. All of that factored. How much time do you spend fixing your property up, right? All of that factored in needs to get deducted from, and I feel like I'm missing something major here, but you got to factor all those things into seeing how much you actually netted on your property, on your principal residence, when you go to sell it, to see if it's actually makes sense. In a high cost of living place like Toronto, does it make sense to buy a house? Just because everybody's doing it, your parents are telling you if you don't do it, you're throwing your money away in rent. The reason that that's being said is because they think there is no other alternative. Before actually I even watched Ramit's video, I was more already on this side, but now, like, I will buy a house one day when the numbers make sense, and I'll get there and I'll buy it, and I'll comfortably buy it for, less than 30% of my gross. When you factor in everything that you put into that house versus just renting and taking the difference and investing it, the problem is, number one, there's a lack of financial literacy, right? Like, people don't understand the power of compound interest in the stock market. If everybody understood the power of compound interest in the stock market properly, and if they taught that in school, I think people would think twice when they go to buy a house to live in. Because you would think, okay, well, $100,000 down on this house could do a lot more for me if I just rented. And you don't have to rent an apartment. You can rent a house and let your landlord deal with the repairs and maintenance. You don't have to listen to everything that's going on out here where people are talking about all these immigrants coming to Canada. It's a narrative. And if financially it makes sense for you to buy a home, then you buy a home. But if you don't run the numbers and you just buy a house because all your friends and family are doing it, then that's very, very irresponsible, right? Like, I feel like when people go to a store and buy something, like let's just say you're going to buy, like look at this microphone, for example, right? Like when I go to a store and I buy this, think about the amount of research you do. Think about, you want to see the quality. You're spending, few $100s on something. You put a lot of thought into it, right? I feel like when people buy a home, you see this shiny object and you fall in love with it and then you buy it. We just think, okay, we can make the payment, everything makes sense, I have enough cash to afford that, I need to create this great life for my family. If I don't own a house, then I'm a failure. And that's not the case at all. Because you could actually generate more wealth and happiness in today's society with the cost of real estate the way it is right now, where it's 5 to 10 times your gross income instead of 2.5 times your gross income. You could actually have a much better life if you live in a high cost of living area where it does not make sense to buy. But unfortunately, because people do not understand compound interest, and I'm going to make a whole video about this. Hopefully I can explain it properly so that people are able to get value from it and actually understand and wake up for the first time and see what they're leaving on the table by not doing that. Instead, they're putting on all this stress in buying a house that they can't afford because yes, they can squeeze their money together and really do it, but now you're missing out on all the things that you would enjoy to be able to do with your cash flow because you're investing all of your money into one thing and that's it. And eventually, the same thing that happens when you buy a new car or you buy anything new, eventually new becomes old and you get used to it, but you're stuck with the payment, you're stuck with the mortgage. The thing that Ramit Sethi was saying is that he had a scenario where he was, I think it was New York, he looked at 2 apartments and the cost of renting was 2.2 times less than owning the same exact apartment, identical apartment. He rented one, another one was for sale. Instead, he rented. So the cost of renting that identical apartment that he looked at was 2.2 times less than actually owning that apartment. So if he were to own that apartment, he would be paying $6,600 a month versus renting, he was only paying about $3,000 or something, $3,200. You would think, I think the average person would look at that and say, well, that extra money is totally worth it because now you're building equity. Now remember, you're not factoring in all the money you're going to put into that house throughout the time that you're living there. Your total cost of ownership needs to be factored in when you go to sell to see if you actually even made money on that house. Me personally, I'm not buying a house to make money on it. If that happens, great. I personally think that having liquidity and freedom of my time, which comes from not having a mortgage, is better. If the numbers make sense, of course, I'm gonna buy a house. Anyways, so what Ramit did was, so the cost to buy the exact same property was $6,600 and he was renting the identical property for $3,000. He took the difference of $3,600 and invested it into the stock market. And now, when I say invested into the stock market, it's probably not what you're thinking. It's not just gambling on stocks that you know nothing about and penny stocks and all that. He put it into an index fund, most likely. Diversified his risk, put it into an index fund, and imagine putting $3,600 into an index fund for a whole year. How much money is that? That's like over 40 grand, I would say, right? And now that money is going to compound over time and generate you high returns without you worrying about this debt that you have that you're trying to pay down. You don't have any interest. When you invest money into the stock market, you don't pay any interest. You actually receive the interest. See how that works? So yeah, just my thoughts on this. I don't know how much of this video I'm going to keep in, but just my thoughts on this, and hopefully this provides some insight to you guys. And I'll see you guys in the next one.